If I go to see my doctor and he or she writes a prescription for me, what should I be asking? What kind of questions should I be asking?
What are all the side effects?
Okay, there you go.
And don't be satisfied with 3 or 4, because every drug has dozens, scores of adverse effects. Many of them are uncommon, but even the ones that only happen in 1% of the time, you probably deserve to know that. Because there are scores and scores of side effects, odds are you're going to have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of them, and you need to be forewarned. And what are the long-term effects? You know, what will happen if I am on this for a year or 2? Especially the psychiatric drugs have not been tested for effectiveness for longer than 8 weeks. 6 or 8 weeks is all the length of time that the drug industry has tested for safety or efficacy,
On all of these
and all those
psychotropic
psychotropic drugs.
Okay.
There may have been some that have been 12 weeks, but mostly 8 weeks or less. And then if the FDA approves them on modest benefit and relative safety, they'll stamp approval, and now that drug gets marketed, and nobody even thinks twice about having people on these for a year or a decade, and they haven't been proven to be safe or effective for more than 6 or 8 weeks. That's scandalous, in my opinion. So maybe you should be asking, well, what have the studies shown? How long has this been tested in humans? Has it been tested in combination with the other drug I'm taking? What about the rat studies and the combination of 2? He'll have to admit that he doesn't know, she or he doesn't know, or that he'll say that hasn't been tested. And that's the truth. No drug company is testing rats, even rats, with more than 1 drug at a time to find out what even the short-term adverse effects are, much less the long-term. And when elderly people are on average of 6, you know, many of them, there are many more than that, there's no safety studies that show that that's safe. You know, what are the adverse effects? We don't know. So definitely ask about that, about what happens if I'm also on another medication.
Okay.
Or are there alternatives to this? And what if my problem is just a fluke? What if my one high blood pressure that they could, is that a fluke? And do I have high blood pressure 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or is it just this once? And if it's just this once, why am I being prescribed a drug for something that is transient? In the psychiatric drug, what if I'm just sad because my dog died? You know, do I need an antidepressant the rest of my life? That's absurd. It's absurd. And if he hasn't asked about that, then he should have. We should, you know, what about, you know, I mentioned this before, the rape at 16 has a lot to do with the depression at age 40. And if you're not making that connection, the doctor's missing something there. And so is Propaxil a treatment for the rape at age 16? No. Psychotherapy is going to deal with that. And all the nutritional approaches and that sort of thing too. So before we accept a drug, we need to find out what are the safer, less costly alternatives. And what if, and how new the drug is, you know, how much experience is there? One of the important things in Prozac Backlash, Joseph Glenn-Mullen talks about every miracle drug that eventually turned to be banned was touted as a miracle drug for the first 10 years. It was a miracle drug, and Prozac was a miracle drug. But then the second decade, there's all these adverse effects start being reported, and we realize, ooh, this, you know, we're kind of nervous about this one now. And then in the third decade, then we realize how dangerous they were, and we ban them, or we discredit them, or by then the patent's out, and we've changed to a different drug. So now there's a Cymbalta instead of the discredited Prozac, and so there's a new drug, and now that's generic anyway, and so we just ignore. But then there's a new miracle drug out there, and until the 10th to 20th year, we're sort of thinking it's wonderful, and then it turns sour. Well, that's because they're only tested for 6, 8 weeks. We should demand that they be tested for 30 years before we get them on the market, right? Well, drug industry wouldn't tolerate that because they need to make their profits on this big investment quicker than that. So they do not allow long-term studies.
That sounds so cynical.
Pretty cynical.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah.